Hello everyone, welcome back. You're watching Empyrion Galactic Survival episode 128. I'm Enigmius and today it's done. It's all done. The Broadsword small vessel is structurally complete, painted and textured, and the blueprint is ready to go on the Steam Workshop. If you're interested, the link is in the information box below the video. So this video is all about the tour. We'll just kind of show you around the ship, and then we'll take it up into the air and we'll fly around for a little bit just so you can see that it does in fact fly, and it'll be all yours and you can take it out and do whatever you want with it. So since the last episode, I've made a handful of changes all around the exterior that were basically of such a small and restricted nature that it really wasn't practical to try and present it to you in a time-lapse sort of build format. It was just all over the place, and there were a number of changes that I made, and then I changed what I changed, and then I changed what I changed, and it just went on and on until I was happy with it. So in the interest of your sanity and mine, I've decided to just kind of let you see the end result. And this ship is small enough that we can do the fly around with the drone, which is kind of handy. The texture and the paint took longer than anything else, mostly because it took me a while to come up with something that I was happy with, and I'm still learning with regards to the painting and the texturing of ships. Little tricks that I like to use that I didn't even know were an option or hadn't really thought of in the past, I guess would be a better way to describe it. And also a lot of things that don't work that I try and it doesn't work, so I get rid of it and I try something else. The end result is, in this case, something that I'm pretty happy with. The front of the ship was the hardest to really do anything with in terms of textures and painting, because there's just so much going on. There's so many different changes in terms of the angles, the things that are happening. And one of the things that I'm learning, especially with this ship, is that the default texture for hardened steel isn't really that bad. It's basically like a square that's got rivets around all four edges, which can be kind of decent looking in the right circumstances. I have a tendency, and this is because I really dislike the texture for the combat steel, I have a tendency to try and get rid of all of the default texture for any ship, whatever I'm building, and it's not really necessary for the hardened steel, and even for the combat steel. There are situations where I can find uses for it that I like, but it's a process and it takes a little while. So this took a little while up front. I got the guns in, which is pretty cool. We've got 4 rail guns, we've got 4 plasma guns, and we've got 4 missile launchers, 2 here and 2 here. I'll just do a quick demonstration for you a little bit later so that you can see the firing pattern. They're fairly accurate. They're fairly well aligned with what's going on with the rest of the ship. So it's pretty easy to get quite a bit of bang for your buck when you're shooting. It rewards accuracy because the cluster of projectiles is quite tight. If you're more of a spray and pray kind of person, you might prefer your weapons spread out a little bit more so that you actually cover more area and you have a better chance of hitting things. So it's personal preference. Mine was to keep things fairly condensed. We've got a pair of lights up front. You can see that guy. There's actually lights all over this damn ship. I just couldn't stop myself. There's another light here. You can't even see it for all the glare. No, I can't. So this is the light off on the drone. If I get really close there, you can sort of see it. If we kind of look away, you can adjust the intensity of the lights. You can adjust how far the light that they cast reaches, but I left most of them the defaults just because. Up here, I had a little bit of fun with the texturing, and especially along here. This ridge along here, I really like the way that turned out, just using the same texture over and over. It kind of gave a nice look to things that I was happy with. And then I kind of duplicated them a little bit to some extent in this little section here, just because it was the natural transition, the 90 degrees coming around here. It's not the same. It's got the this texture here along here, and then this texture here was flipped upside down when I placed it on here. But either way, it looks unified enough that it kind of made sense to me. Most of the ship is painted in white, and you wouldn't know it necessarily by looking at a lot of the blocks, because a lot of blocks, when you paint them white, still look kind of gray, like these ones here, for example. I did a little bit of detailing in black just because it seemed to be a nice contrast, and I didn't want to go too crazy with it. But at the same time, I feel that the black helped in a number of different situations, and because I didn't go overboard with it, it seems to be just a bit of an accent that really benefits the overall look of the ship. But again, if you like the ship and you hate the paint job, you can always change it. That's one of the options available to you. We've got the enclosures here for some of the lateral thrusters. These are done in a light gray, I believe, is the color that I chose, or the dark gray default, whatever, one way or the other. Fairly simple, but again, keeping up with the idea that we don't necessarily want to paint the entire ship white, because then it looks too monotone and it's not really all that interesting. Keeping with the gray sort of theme for the enclosure aspect of things, I did the same thing around here. Just gray. Different textures of gray, but basically the same color. And then I took the this texture here, this sort of the lines with the rivets in the corners kind of thing, and I applied it to the cylinders, and you get sort of a pipe kind of feel to it, or like a conduit, which works. It's kind of the idea that I was going for in the first place, so that was a success, I think. Over here, the same thing, except this is sort of asymmetrical. If you look at it on this side, we've got like 1, 2, 3 of those 90-degree bends on the top, and then 2 down on the bottom. Come over here, we've still got 2 on the bottom, and we've still got 3 on top, but they're in different positions. I don't necessarily think it added anything substantial to the ship, but it's one of those things that a person might look at and say, hey, I just realized they're not the same on both sides. Who knows? Maybe someone will really like it. Maybe most people won't care. Whatever ends up being, I'm okay with it. And then we continued that gray down along the back here. We got a blue light in there because I felt like it, and a little bit of texturing on this back just to kind of break up the great big sheets of panels and things that were the inevitable consequence of doing the back this way. And then I did a little bit more texturing, in this case looking like vents on these structures that are holding these guys in place. I feel that worked out particularly well, just because you would expect to see vents sort of near engines of some kind. And of course the same thing on the other side. I really like the way the back turned out. It's very, very simple. There's not a whole lot to it, but to me it could have been a lot worse, I guess. Maybe that's the best thing I can say for it, is that it could have been a lot worse. And then over here, of course, basically the exact same thing coming around. So that's the exterior. Oh, I painted the feet orange just because. Actually, the reason why I painted the feet orange is because if we come down here, you can see I textured the underneath as well. And I wouldn't say it's random textures. It's all symmetrical and stuff like that. But it was designed to... I didn't want, say for example, in a multiplayer world, you're flying around in your ship and someone looks up and says, you know, that whole ship looks okay, but the underside is completely untouched. No one did anything. Why didn't you paint it? I didn't want that. And even if you're in a single player world and you get underneath the ship to do some maintenance, maybe you took some damage or whatever, and you look and it looks like crap and you're feeling not too happy about it. So I was under here for a while, painting and texturing and getting things all set up the way that I wanted them to. And I found that because of where I was doing this, I was on the platform way over there where the Saturnus is. I had to get the ship flying, you know, just a few feet up in the air so that I could get under and start doing all this stuff. And the ship would like to fall down every once in a while. It would just sort of slowly descend after a while of just holding its position just fine. And I got caught underneath a couple of times, and I had to do some sort of weird clipping, squirmy thing to get out. I was able to get out, but then I realized that it's dangerous underneath this ship, so these got painted orange. That's the story. Now we go inside, and you can see, not surprisingly, we've got orange on our little glass enclosures because it's the industrial thing to do, and they are enclosing the lift thrusters. We've got our little orange walkway warning, please don't stand here. I've got the fuel tanks in these little add-on segments. If you saw the last episode, you saw me build these enclosures here. They're just like a 4 wide and however many blocks tall, like 6.5 blocks tall. But this one I added a little bit onto it so that I could put the fuel tanks in here. And then it's got the little piece of glass down here to discourage you from walking too close. And pretty easy access to the fuel tanks when it comes time to A, add more fuel, and B, look to see how many of these things are lit. Apparently with Alpha 6.0, which is coming out either tomorrow or yesterday, depending on when I get this video out, you only have to like put fuel into one tank and it'll automatically distribute to the rest. I don't know all the specifics or hardly any of the specifics, but we apparently might not need to manage individual tanks in order to fuel up our ships anymore. Either way, it'll be easy to access to the tanks in order to do whatever you need to do under any circumstances. Copied the same theme with the glass and the orange around the core. You can see the core in there, just kind of hanging out, doing its thing. The conduit thing that I did up top, I did the same thing here with these cylinders, so it almost looks like if you get the ship moving really fast and going all over, that this thing will be swinging all over the place. It won't, of course, because the mechanics don't do that, but it kind of looks like it might. All of these enclosures, in the last episode, I put in the light. You can see the light there, but all around it was cubes, which I didn't really like because it just felt to me like it would be blocking off the ability of the light to spread, to do whatever light wants to do. So I went and I redid the tops of all of these things so that they're all slopes now, so that the light seems like it has an easier time transmitting to the various different corners, and consequently the back side of the ship has this really weird red and blue lighting sort of thing going on. I put a blue light here. I don't know specifically why, I just did. I'll be doing that, and the red lights that seemingly shine their light through the roofs. We get some weird stuff going on the roof, and also the blue light that we've got through this back door here also shines in from somewhere. I noticed the lights just kind of shine through things, I guess would be the summary, the thing to take away from that, and it does some weird stuff. If you wanted to change this, if you found this to be a little bit too gaudy, or maybe you're playing on an older PC and all this lighting stuff is giving you a hard time, you know where the lights are to go remove them or whatever you need to do. We've got our generators up here, and I added another 40 or so RCS units to the area in behind what we're looking at right now, in behind the generators specifically. Still not the most maneuverable ship. It's fine. It's definitely a ship that you can use and get lots of use out of based on my early testing, but it's not, you know, it's not a starfighter. It's not going to be doing flips and turns on a dime kind of thing. It's too big for that. So that's the back end of the ship with those enclosures. The front end, you can see here's the cockpit, and it's in this weird sort of sling that I made for it, suspended from the ceiling. It doesn't provide any practical benefits. You can access the cockpit from the floor. It's not like you have to jump up or do anything special to get into the cockpit. But it just seemed like something that would be fun to do, so that's what I did. I don't dislike it, but again, it's you could just remove the cockpit and put it down on the floor if you really wanted to. Down here we've got our fridges and our O2 supply. Pretty handy to have them here because again, you come in from the side door and you're suffocating. You've got your O2 right here, or maybe you're starving to death, you've got your fridges right here. Over here we've got the O2 tanks, 10 of them. A little bit of asymmetry in the design there because there's nothing over here. And then we've got our storage. Here we've got our ammo storage. We've got 12 of these ammo containers. And these little cabinets that I built around them are designed so that you can reach the back as well. So that you can reach all 12 ammo containers specifically without any real problem. It's pretty straightforward. But again, also offers a little bit of protection. If you happen to get a hole punched in the hull somewhere, there's a little bit of added protection that's going to keep them from being quickly hit and make them explode, which would be kind of a bad thing to happen because they're all stacked next to one another. And then we've got the regular storage over here, and again, the enclosure that we built for them allows you to reach the ones in the back. So you have 6 regular storage containers, which is a lot. I mean, realistically speaking, I don't think too many people would ever fill all 6 of these unless they use this ship as their sort of mobile base for a really long time, and then they might accumulate enough to fill these guys up. And lastly, got a constructor up here, just because it's a handy thing to have. I didn't have food processors. Can you even put, I don't even remember, can you put food processors in small vessels? I don't know. If you can, you might want to add 1 or 2 I didn't add any at all because I wasn't really too concerned about it. I've got so much food elsewhere. And then lastly, of course, we did some aesthetic detailing up front. We did a little bit of a black accent here, just because it seemed like a good place for an accenting color, some contrast with everything else that was going on without having it be overbearing. And all the way around basically kept things pretty simple. Not too much variance in the way of color, just because we've got all these lights doing crazy things. And that's the interior detailing all done. So now what we're going to do, we're going to fly this out of here. We didn't need to fly it out of there. We could have just put it away. But we are going to get in here, close this, and that's closed. Close this. Then we'll jump up here. Everything is grouped so that you can turn all of the thrusters on and off. It's got some lift. It's definitely got some push to it when you want to get airborne. I would suspect for a ship this size, if you were using it to go after points of interest, for example, where you really want a certain amount of mobility to dodge incoming fire, that the vertical plane would be just as important as the horizontal one in terms of moving around and ducking and dodging and trying to stay out of harm's way. For its size as a small vessel, I'm pretty happy with it. I feel like I would like it to be a little bit faster. I don't know if that's a realistic kind of thing to be saying at this point, just because of its size. It's pretty massive as small vessels go. So the last thing that I will show you before we start talking about what's up next is the fire control, or the grouping, I guess you could say. And specifically just looking at where things land relative to the crosshair. And it would be, I think, helpful if I had an actual, something that resembled a target. It doesn't really matter how far away it is. In fact, the closer it is, the easier it is to see what the accuracy is. There's a rock. That looks like a good choice. So you can see the crosshair is aiming towards the top portion of the rock. For the missiles, we destroyed the rock. To be completely honest, I didn't realize that I was going to do that. But you can see the missiles are pretty accurate. I think that might be a part of the homing feature with the missiles. But I'm not 100% because I don't use missiles a lot, to be absolutely honest. And I don't really follow the features that I don't use a lot. So the next option is the... what exactly? Are these a plasma? Yeah, this is the plasma cannon. And relative to the crosshair, it's hitting quite accurately. So if we move in a little bit closer, I mean, you can't get too much better than that. In terms of the actual practical value of that, it's pretty good. And then the last thing we can look at is the railgun, which is hitting low. It's kind of hitting just a little bit below the bottom hash mark on the crosshair. So that's something to keep in mind if a person is concerned about making sure that they're dead accurate with the railguns, is that they do tend to come in a little bit low relative to where you're aiming, but still not bad at all. For the number of guns that we have on here and how tightly grouped they are, that's pretty reasonable accuracy. And overall, I would say that this is, in terms of function, the hammerhead was a little bit better because it was a little bit smaller. But in terms of overall design and how much fun I had building it, this is tops by a wide margin over all of my other small vessel designs. I can't even fit this on top of the Saturnus because the Saturnus is too uneven on the back end, and everywhere else has sort of got something sticking up out of it. But if we kind of bring it in here, there's really nothing we can do. It's just too damn big. Which, I mean, it could be worse if you're concerned about something going not quite right with a ship you've designed. Having it too damn big is not necessarily the worst thing that could happen. I'm trying very hard to dock. Oh, we got it. We got it docked. It's officially docked on the Saturnus. So with that, we're going to shut it down. At least we can bring it places with us now when we take the Saturnus to places. We are going to be going to a number of different places. Specifically, we're going to head back to Zahin's, and we're going to pick up all the iron that we've been neglecting. We're going to need it. The next thing that we're going to build is a orbital shipyard, and by orbital I mean a structure in space where we will build ships, because the next ship that I want to build, is very, very large in my head. It is absolutely enormous. It will have room to dock a Saturnus. Not necessarily enclosed, but still room to dock a Saturnus, to give you an idea of what I'm thinking of in terms of the scale of the next ship that we do. So we're going to need lots of material. So that's what I'm going to be doing. If you notice a bit of a delay between this episode and the next, it's just because the behind-the-scenes stuff is taking longer than normal. And of course, we will be back once I have everything sorted and we're ready to start with the build for our space-based shipyard. And then we'll go from there. So if you want to be notified about the next and future videos, as always, you can subscribe to my channel or follow me on social media. Links for social media are always in the information section below the video. Feel free to leave your comments and feedback. Thanks for watching, guys, and take care.